Hello guys, what is happening and welcome to this video. So in this video we are talking about inflation. Canada has just released another inflation number and it's not what you think. It's not what you think at all. But we are starting to see signs of disinflation. We're going to kind of go through a little bit of what I think is causing that and what we think is going to happen going into the future, which is very, very important. Now, this is only probabilities and speculation at this point because nobody knows exactly what is going to happen into the future, but we do know things that are happening right now and the probabilities of those things ending and then things happening in the future. So we can kind of gauge some sort of pulse on what's going to happen. So anyway, the inflation rate has cooled to 7%, but food prices are still climbing. At least that's what the government is saying. That's what CBC is saying. So I've actually seen the inflation report and I won't bore you with that. Instead, I thought we'd come here. So gas prices fell by 9.6% in August from where they were the previous month. That is the biggest 1 month drop in gasoline prices since April 2020 when the pandemic was just beginning. So this is really, really big when you think about it, because in April 2020, what was the oil market anticipating back then? They were anticipating all these lockdowns and the demand just dropping off a cliff. And a similar sort of shift is happening right now. But it's different. It's very, very different in terms of circumstances. So not only are the oil prices coming from a higher benchmark than they were before, but you've also got the fact that there's a lot of unknown about where oil prices are going to go. Because yes, there is the fact that we're heading into a recession/depression. So where does that really leave oil demand? Well, it typically goes down. But because of so much constraints, because of supply not coming online, and because of refining capacity and many other different things, it means that the oil market still remains a tight space. And the thing is, which is really interesting about this, is obviously April 2020. You just have to think back and kind of relate the two. And it gets more interesting as we get further down this, as they mention this date again. So while gasoline got a little cheaper, food prices continued their increase. The cost of groceries has risen by 10.8% in the past year. So that's just insane. That's, everybody has to buy food to live, and food is just absolutely soaring in price. Even the poorest families who can't even afford cars, they still have to feed themselves. And food affects absolutely everybody and affects the poorest members of your society too. So let's take a look at all these price increases. So condiments, spices and vinegars up 17.2%, bakery products up 15.4%, non-alcoholic beverages up 14.1%, fresh fruit up 13.2%, sugar and confectionery up 11.3%, fish, seafood and other marine products up 8.7%, dairy products 7%, and meat 6.5%. So that's really interesting. So on a monthly basis, the inflation rate fell by 0.3%. That's the biggest monthly cool down since 2020. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? Because they said that's the biggest monthly cool down since 2020. But note how they didn't put since April 2020. So if this is the biggest cool down since April 2020, then we know the result of it is mostly the energy impacts, because we just saw that gasoline prices have had the biggest month-over-month drop since 2020. And we know that energy prices are a major component of the CPI. So the thing is, and I'm not doubting the relevance of energy prices in the CPI, I just want to make that clear. I think they need to be there, obviously, and they need to be represented by high percentages because energy is the economy, as a lot of people say. So I think it's very, very interesting because when it comes back to that energy story, it's highly manipulated right now because you've essentially got Biden releasing lots from the SPR, the special petroleum reserves, and that is flooding the market with oil. And basically, the SPR releases that have happened have driven the price of oil down. And couple that with the fears of recession, it has meant this kind of perfect storm that people aren't really looking at. And you have to realize that most people, unfortunately, do not think critically about this. They struggle to relate two things together. But because you've had sort of a perfect storm in the oil market, in the sense that you've got SPR releases and then you've got fears of a recession, so people are anticipating demand to go down. So then when they see these big builds in inventory levels of oil inventories, they think, oh wow, like we're heading into recession, sell oil. And that has been the impulse for the past couple of cycles. But this time, it might not be the long-term impulse, but short-term, it definitely seems like it's continuing. So the thing is, we have to then think about when those SPR releases are going to end, because they're not going to last forever. Eventually, those SPR releases are going to end. So why would Biden be releasing oil from the SPR? Well, it's an election year. There's the midterm elections that are coming up in November, I believe. So he is trying to bring down gas prices. He's trying to bring down inflation because he knows inflation is kryptonite to him and his party being re-elected. So the thing is, he knows that. So he's trying to bring it down and manipulate the price of oil. And he is managing to do it right now. But by doing so, this is exactly what governments did in 2020. By manipulating markets and interfering with markets like they do, they create huge distortions that investors don't understand. And they don't understand how to bet around those distortions. And that is the result of most people not thinking critically about the situation and what's happening. So let's fast forward, and we're in the first quarter of next year, for instance. All those SPR releases have stopped. We're heading into a recession. More people are getting unemployed, but all the inventory builds are actually drawing negative. Like, they're actually drawing down all the time now. And oil is starting to rise in price again, and gasoline prices are going up again. And we're heading into a recession. And that is quite possible to happen just because of what's going on. The real thing that is hard to predict is the effect of China and the constant basically them, I don't want to say the word, the loc-downs. I can't think of a code word for it, but basically I don't want to say that word. But essentially in China, when that happens in these different cities, obviously that has a massive impact on oil demand as well. So you have to factor that in as well. So I think it's incredibly interesting, and we just have to continually monitor the situation. But this could be one of those times where inflation goes down, we get disinflation, and then it shoots back up, because what's happening in the energy market is positioning itself to go higher again, not necessarily right now, but further down the road due to what Biden has done. Because think about this again as well, because he's artificially suppressing the prices, that means more people are now buying instead of holding back on going on journeys in the car and everything like that. So because nobody is holding back, that means demand is even higher. And then that means it creates these huge distortions that I hope you can kind of see from what I'm saying there. So anyways, the relief in core inflation provides a powerful signal that the Bank of Canada's rate hikes are having an impact, an economist with the consultancy RSM Canada. So the Bank of Canada, this was interesting because I thought the exact same thing when this came out. But instead of like this economist, I thought this gives them confidence that what they're doing is working, even though it's actually doing very little when you think about it. It's having a big impact on asset prices, but is it having such a massive impact on energy prices? No. I mean, the Fed has even come out and said that they can't control energy prices by raising interest rates, there are some things that are out of their control. So even the Fed isn't that stupid to admit that. So basically the CPI is coming down. We're getting disinflation because oil prices and energy prices are coming down. But if you have a central bank that is as stupid as the Bank of Canada is, and I say that not to be condescending or anything like that, it's just evident from their actions how stupid they are. And yeah, you basically have that going on. They don't realize, they think, hey, what we're doing is working, we're bringing back down inflation, so they're going to continually hike. And I think that means, from my perspective anyway, and who knows really what's going to happen, but I think that definitely practically seals the deal on another 75 basis points, taking the overnight rate to 4% at the next meeting, because they're going to think with their false confidence that what they're doing is now working, which it is on asset prices, and that eventually will translate into demand, but it's not yet happening right now. Like, that transition will be seen next year, like in Q2 of next year. So that's when we'll finally get the impact of these rate hikes. So these rate hikes are not having an impact yet. It is just purely the SPR releases that are having an impact, and that is really dangerous. And Eric Townsend, who is a specialist when it comes to commodities, he has a podcast called Macro Voices, and he always talks about it's every week, and he always talks about the oil market on his weekly roundup. And you should really listen to him because he's an expert. That's where I get a lot of my thoughts and insights from, is smarter minds than me, people like him. So the thing is, this really doesn't bode well for the future. And I think a lot of people will be doing a rain dance right now, thinking that the rate hike isn't going to happen now because inflation is cooling. And again, these people are just jesters. They're not really looking at the ever-evolving situation of what's happening. They're just simply commenting on what they think. You know, it takes a lot to come out here and tell you my views, because they will be wrong inevitably at certain times and right at other times. Like, I'm never going to be right 100% of the time, but I just go with the probabilities, and the probabilities say that I'll be right most of the time if I continue to follow the probabilities instead of following my ego or my emotions or anything like that. So it's also interesting that in the same line here they put, but even at 7%, the official rate is still more than twice as high as the central bank likes to see, which means consumers and borrowers should expect even more rate hikes to come. And then it basically shows you this chart of what's happening with inflation, which is really, really interesting. So yeah, it's really interesting what's happening with inflation right now, guys. We'll continue to heartbeat it and take a look at what is going on. But the reality is the core inflation barely slowed down, and that excludes energy and food. So if you actually added food into the core inflation, then the inflation would have risen month over month because food prices rose so much. And obviously they manipulate the CPI. They added in used vehicle prices in January after vehicle prices had exploded. They were expecting to catch the top of that market, and they continued to go up a little bit, obviously until about April, May. And since then, used vehicle prices have started coming down. So that's started dragging down the CPI, even though they never captured the first part of the rises last year because it wasn't included. So you have to bear in mind there's all these kind of manipulations that are going on to make you think inflation is lower than it actually is. And it's the government that comes out with the inflation numbers, and they are the ones that want inflation to seem lower so they can spend more, because they don't want to seem like they're contributing to that inflation. This especially comes on the back that we've now got a conservative leader that has at least a basic understanding of economics and is going to hold the government to account on that. So they really are treading on thin ice, because they can be literally torn to pieces now by the opposition, because we finally got somebody with at least a basic economics understanding who is leader of the Conservative Party. And I'm not saying the Conservative Party or anything is better than... I'm not getting into the politics of it. I'm just saying we have somebody with a basic basic understanding of economics, for Christ's sake. That's what I'm basically trying to say. But anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Please subscribe to the channel if you're interested. If you want more exclusive videos or anything like that, or to support the channel more, then head over to Patreon. The link is in the description below. And I'll see you guys on the next video, which will probably be very, very soon, as the Fed is due to announce their rate hike. So I'll see you in the next one. Peace, guys. Bye-bye.